Go.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the Thursday, November 19th, 2020 meeting of the Albany Common Council's Planning, Economic Development, and Land Use Committee. Committee members present include Tom Hoey, Councilmember Joyce Love, myself, Kathy Fahey, other council members present, Richard Conte, and Owusu Anani. And we have our planning staff, Director Brad Glass and Amy Levine from the Corporation Counsel's Office. And Council Member Alfredo Ballerin just joined us. Welcome, Alfredo. He's also on the committee. And our staff, Michelle Andre and John Rafael Pichardo. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're here this evening to review the mayor's appointments to the Board of Zoning Appeals. These are 3-year terms, and we'll be interviewing 6 members tonight. And we're going to start with, there are three are new appointments, and then there are 3 reappointments. The first individual that we will be interviewing is Paige Barnum, and she is she would be a new appointment and to fill a position. And there's some discrepancy as to when her appointment would finish up. Richard, you thought it was, let's see here, 2022. I have down here from the mayor's office, 2021. There's some confusion about that expiration.
Yeah, I believe she was appointed to fill a vacancy that previously was held by Mike Apostle.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Mike Apostle was incorrectly appointed to either a year extra or a year shorter, I forget what,
Mm-hmm.
but that's where the discrepancy is. So,
well, I spoke to the mayor's office. They are comfortable with changing that to that 2022 date.
okay. I mean, the point here is the terms are supposed to be staggered,
Right.
so that an even number comes up every year.
Mm-hmm.
With an odd member board, actually, you're going to have one with 3, but
Yes.
the way it's proposed right now, it's 3, 2, 3, 1, 3. It should be 3, 2, 2.
Okay.
So that would correct the staggering, which is also consistent with general city law.
All right. So then we would have expiring in. All right. Well, so then let's go ahead with Paige, and we'll
Yeah.
let her know about that. So if you could invite
Mr. Hoey
Paige
has
in.
his hand up.
Oh, excuse me. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted, before we bring the candidates in, Richard, can you talk about, and I didn't have a chance the other night to ask this question, but Richard, we're talking about shrinking the size of the BZA. How will what we're doing tonight impact that? Are we talking when all these terms expired?
Yeah, and I think in discussions I've had with the mayor's office, and I think people are generally favorable towards reducing to 5. That's the impression I get, at least. But the way it happens is you reduce from 7 to 5 in compliance with general city law through vacancies. So you don't toss anybody off unless they want to, resign or step down or whatever, but it comes through vacancies. And I believe we'll have enough moving forward vacancies going forward to be able to enact an ordinance this year that puts in place a reduction that will take place at some point when those vacancies occur or people cycle out and we're back down to 5 members.
Well, just to follow up on that, so when somebody's term is up, that's not a vacancy then? Or you're saying a vacancy is when somebody, retires or resigns and wants to do something else?
A vacancy is when the seat is vacant. And I don't know whether JR or Amy can correct me, but if a term ends, unless that person is reappointed, that is a vacant seat. So it's up to the mayor as to whether or not she would want to make a reappointment or appoint someone new.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So why don't we welcome in Paige Barnum. Hi, Paige.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're so glad you could come, and we're glad you are interested in serving on the Board of Zoning Appeals. My name's Kathy Fahey, and as we go around asking questions, people will introduce themselves. What we normally do is ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in serving on the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then council members will go around and ask questions.
All right. So to introduce myself, I'm Paige Barnum. I currently work for New York State as a parks planner with the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. Prior to that, I actually worked in a municipal office in Mississippi. I worked in the planning department there. As a municipal planner, I oversaw the planning board and the Historic Preservation Commission. Part of my responsibility there was, we wrote the papers for the planning staff's position on, various cases. So I administered those boards. I helped write ordinance, amend ordinance. I have a graduate degree in planning. I also have my certification with the American Planning Association, my AICP, American Institute of Certified Planners. And why I'm interested in serving on the board is, one, I like civil service, as is evident by my current employment. Also, I really do love municipal work. And so being able to, talk actively about zoning and planning cases is different than what I do in my planning career right now. So it's trying to get, the best of both worlds. So between giving back and my own interest, as dorky as it sounds, in, zoning and planning and development was sort of my interest. And it helps me, feel like I'm contributing my, I don't want to say expertise, but, giving back the knowledge I've gained throughout my life and career to my community.
Okay, very good. So let's go around now to council members. We'll start with committee members. Any questions for Paige?
Tom has his hand up.
Apologize, Tom. I'm looking for your, okay, go ahead, please.
Hi, Paige. What school did you get your graduate degree in planning from?
I went to Cornell. So I'm a native of Kansas. So learning about home rule was really fascinating, studying in the state of New York. And while I was there, I had an opportunity to do a lot of work volunteer-wise with different communities in the Finger Lakes region. So understanding, the diversity of city functions and how different communities operate was really great about that program.
Oh, good. There's 15 wards in the city, and each ward is different and unique in its own way, but it is still part of the greater city. I'm up in the 15th ward, the last ward in the city, and we're right on. It used to be rural. It's become more suburban and stuff. And the people I represent do have a concern about overdevelopment. Now, it's not that we're against development, or I'm not against it, but it's a thoughtful, smart, fits into the community type of development. I'm from Queens, New York, and I left. I had a great job at City Corp, and I left it because I felt I didn't like that closed in feeling, and that's why I moved to Albany. So I'm going this long about way of telling you it's important that you're going to be on this, BZA, and it's important that you realize the audience that you're deciding projects on, and that's just my thing. I mean, you're going to be appointed, and you have the degree and stuff in planning, better. But I'm just trying to tell you, gut, how people feel from the gut up here about it. Now, I didn't have much experience having to go in front of the BZA, but I did for a project for Chase Manhattan Bank, and it's on Homestead and Western Avenue. I drove by today, and it's open, and it looks beautiful. But there was a lot of pushback because they needed a certain amount of parking spaces, and that wasn't allowed according to, the zoning for the area. And it was kind of we had to testify, brought a lot of neighbors in and stuff like that, and we were approved. And if you ever have a chance, you're driving up Western Avenue, make sure you look at it, because they really, even though there's 23 parking spots there, they did landscaping, they have lawns, 2 big lawns. It really looks good, and it fits into the community and the character. So, so my only question is, I hope that you'll listen, and that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to comment briefly on that. So the city I worked for in Mississippi experienced 110% growth in 10 years. It's one of the fastest growing micropolitans in the country. And there certainly were generations of families that are like, I've been here 8 generations. Like, what is happening? Why are all these outsiders? Why are out of state students coming? Because it was a college town. So I very much understand, the reticence towards development and folks feeling a real, sense of ownership for where they live. And in planning, community input's one of the most important, elements. And, also just the fact that you have to actually hear people, and you can't just push your weight around, and really letting people know that you hear them and you understand where they're coming from, super important. I totally get it. So.
Okay, other questions by committee members first? Richard, did I see you had your hand up?
Thank you. Thanks, Paige. Quick question. So you're fairly new to the area,
Yes.
about 2 years.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about what brought you up here? Was it just a job, or was it things that were happening in this area that you found interesting? And would you find being relatively new to the area positive, or maybe a drawback in terms of how you might look at zoning issues or issues before the BZA, things of that nature?
Yeah.
Sometimes some of these issues come with understanding the people in the neighborhoods, where they've been, where we're going, and a whole range of things that are out there.
Right. So to first answer your question, how I ended up here, it was my job. I absolutely love my time in northern Mississippi. But what brought me here was, I went to school here in New York, not
Right.
Albany, but I love New York State. And I was sort of looking for a job that would allow me to stop being such an itinerant. I've lived in a myriad of cities since I left home for college. I've lived in Los Angeles, Chicago, Omaha. I'm from Wichita, Kansas, and I sort of tire of always packing up and moving. So, this is sort of my way of like staking my own like residential claim to place in a way. And, I think there is a tendency of my generation, millennials, right, to have that, tendency to go to bigger places. And I really tend to like places that seem to have a chip on their shoulder or feel forgotten and overlooked, and know that they deserve caring, compassionate professionals as well. So rather than, stick it right out in Chicago or, go down to New York City, I decided to come here. And I find that I forget that it's not normal to always move around. So to sort of transition to your second question, do I think my outsider perspective is good or bad? I think it's kind of good, and that I don't have the same, history with the city that other people do, where they feel like bogged down by, if folks complain about it, or they're like, oh, it used to be this way. I think my experience in other places gives me good ideas about what's worked, what hasn't. And it also sort of alleviates me of any tendency to have biases, because I don't necessarily know the sordid past of a project or a developer. Some might think that handicaps me in my understanding of a project, but I like to think it, makes me an impartial judge, and I can look better at the facts and, understand that it's, my responsibility to look at what's legal and not legal, not just like how I'm feeling, or my, I may have been burnt by something that happened in my own neighborhood, and I don't think I have that baggage per se. So I think my relative newness is an advantage.
Okay, thank you. I'm not a native Albanian either, so, I brought other perspectives with me as well. And by the way, I am your council member. I don't think.
That's
we've-
right. Ward 6.
That's correct. That's, thanks.
Any other questions by committee members? Okay, Paige, I wanted to give you an opportunity. Do you have any questions at all for us or about
I
your role?
I think I'm pretty good. I've, had the opportunity and I serve on the executive board for the Capital District Planning Association, which is at various times had City of Albany planners also serve on the board. So I've, familiarized myself with boards and functions in that way. So, and everyone's been very responsive via email. So if anything comes to mind.
Okay, and your time commitment and so on's all been explained.
Yep.
All right, terrific. In that case, we really appreciate again that you're willing to serve. And
Hey, Kathy.
yes, go ahead, Owusu.
Yeah, other members. Yeah. I just had a question. Thank you for your interest in serving in a board of zoning. And my question is more so, I tell you a little bit about myself. I represent the Pine Hills neighborhood, the 10th Ward, Midtown Pine Hills. And the houses particularly have been in decline all across our city. And there's been a new energy for developers to want to invest in our city. But there are some individuals, small groups here and there that always has this type of mentality where sentiment towards not in my backyard mentality. Have you heard about the term NIMBYism by any chance?
Yep, I have.
Okay, and what is your interpretation of it by any chance? And also, can you give us an example where you might be independent, if you are to be appointed? Very too often there's going to be special interests who are going to be reaching out to you. There's going to be mayor at the administration office. They're going to be individuals from all over that's going to try to get you to support their action. Can you give us an example of where you could be independent, or how much thought when a small group of residents come in opposition to a development that it might be in the best interest of the city as a whole? It might not be in the best interest of the neighborhood that specifically might be, but it will be in the best interest of moving the city forward, particularly when it comes to affordable housing and so forth.
Yeah, so just to give you, my interpretation of NIMBYism, obviously not in my backyard. And it's sort of the fear of change, and that change will push folks out. And I understand that there are two sides to that. There's one that it's, I don't like change, you're going to property value and or make it unaffordable for me is the other one. Like, it's obviously a huge concern in lots of neighborhoods in Albany where the rental market's really strong because folks can't get in. And so when you have that fear of not in my backyard, as far as new development goes and pushes people out, that's one concern. The alternative is citing projects that aren't conducive to a high quality of life. For example, not everyone wants a gas station in their backyard. It's not necessarily aesthetically pleasing, and is not necessarily conducive to health. And obviously, it's not lost on anyone that social inequities are very pronounced and a very contentious issue right now. And being cognizant of that and sensitive to the needs and desires of different communities is really important. So I think we're running up against that in Albany. Change being scary. And as far as, neutrality to folks that may try to persuade me one way or another, I think it just goes back to knowing that, as far as in my own career, I've never, worked for a political party. I've never worked for a partisan organization. I'm very much have dedicated myself to the idea of government is good and I work for the people. And so hearing both sides and recognizing that sometimes what the people need is an influx of business opportunities and workforce development opportunities, but they also need a affordable, healthy and safe place to live. And so how you negotiate those two things is really important without it's about compromise. Like, I went into planning because we're about consensus building and finding where we can better align our interests and compromise to, provide for our constituents ultimately. So it's not a matter of, lining my pockets with like corporate funds. That's, unethical to start with. And as, a planner, like I said, I have my AICP certification. Like there's a code of ethics by which we operate. Like I risk my own career by threatening to be, swayed one way or the other. So it's very important to me to have that integrity, not only as a citizen with neighbors and community members that I am there to help, but also, my own professional integrity. That's sort of a roundabout answer. I hope it sort of got at what you were thinking or asking.
Thank you, Paige.
Thank you.
Alfredo.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Paige, for being willing to serve. You definitely have the credentials. You definitely have the academics and the work background. I kind of want to get your thoughts on the opposite of not in my backyard, but why my backyard again? I represent a community that's minority majority that is got challenges and that we're working through them, but that seems to have a overflow of special need projects or programs that seem to be situated, and it makes it very difficult for us to overcome some of our challenges when these type of initiatives are being brought back to our community. And we have a very open, very kind community, but at the same point, we have held a higher weight of the burden to fix the ills of previous generations. And, that burden should be shared. That burden should not just be put on certain neighborhoods that already have challenges and already have struggles, while other neighborhoods don't even consider putting these type of special projects in. So I know New York City has some legislation regarding fair share. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but how would you make sure that neighborhoods are protected from being saturated with programs or initiatives that have their own challenges? And when I say that, I say, how would you be willing? Because the law may say they should be there, but is it socially right to continually to put them there? Is it morally right to continue to put them in the same communities and neighborhoods time after time? So I guess that's my question in my soapbox.
No, it's important, as I intimated earlier, like it's really like as challenging as, the pandemic and all the social upheaval has been this past year. It's been really important because it does give everyone a better understanding about the experiences of your community. And so I think the onus is on the city and folks that sit on boards to, one, be transparent and make that information available to communities and explain, why we all share that responsibility. I think it's, ensuring that folks do, be they the representative for that ward or be they the board member that just happens to live in that community, making sure that they have ample opportunity to comment and that they, have people that advocate for them, just because, part of that fair share is having your fair opportunity to comment and share your grievances and concerns. And when you lose that voice, it's no wonder that, things keep happening in the same neighborhood. So it's how do you amplify the voice and elevate it and ensure that people see themselves as part of a larger community. I don't have any like a specific concrete example of how, to avoid that other than like, we're all much more cognizant about it now. And I think that's the advantage to having a board of, diverse folks. Like I'm a planner, but I know other people that currently sit on the BZA are attorneys or work in the health industry. So I think that diverse perspective and diverse background is really important. I myself am like a first generation college student. I don't come from a family of like an educated background. So I felt very strongly about economic opportunities and knowing that has been just really important to how I've gotten where I am at in my own life. And so ensuring that, we can do what we can to elevate and give opportunity to all communities is really important. I'm sort of blabbing. I don't have a good answer off the top of my head, but other than like understanding, like we have an obligation to one another as, residents of Albany.
Thank you. And I just wanted to get that in the back of your head, because you will be making some tough decisions. And I don't want the mentality that you go into it thinking it's always, not in my backyard. Many times it's why my backyard again. And I think that doesn't get as fair as a shake as it should.
Yeah, and I think too, that's something that, just as a planning professional, the profession hasn't always been, progressive and forward thinking. It wasn't always green streets and good public access. It was, how can we draw lines to exclude people? And so I think the fact that I, am a professional that has that professional baggage just by virtue of having a planning title, I think is really important to know that we know better and we need to be, make use of that information to avoid repeating our mistakes. And, they say history is cyclical, but this is an opportunity to not like keep in that loop.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Paige. That's a very interesting discussion. So what I'm going to ask council members, does someone have a motion that they would like to put forth?
I'd like to forward a motion for
Alfredo.
for Paige to be added to the BCA.
Okay, do we have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Tom Hoey. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, unanimous. Paige, thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you for your willingness to serve. And it's really terrific to meet you, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Kathy, can I, quick question?
Yes, go ahead, Owusu.
Yeah, how many are we appointing as we go? How many vacancies do we have, and are we appointing after
We have
discussion?
three. We have 3 reappointments, and then we have 3 vacancies tonight that we're going to be interviewing folks for.
All right.
All right, so we're ready for Paige. We'll say goodbye to you, and we're ready to see Richard Berkeley. Okay, Mr. Berkeley. Richard, how are you? Hello, Richard.
Sorry, I was still muted. My apologies.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm obviously wearing the same suit as I was
Oh, there
in
you are.
that picture.
Oh, okay. Well, great to see you. So what we'll do is, this is a reappointment, and it's for your term that would expire in 12/31/22 is what I have down here. And so what we'll ask you to do, since you have been serving, is to talk a little bit about your service on the Board of Zoning Appeals. And then maybe the council committee members and other council members can ask you a few questions.
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair and members of the committee. It's always a pleasure to come and have a chance to talk with you. So let me introduce myself. I'm Richard Berkeley, for any of those who have never met me before. And I have been the chair of the zoning board for the last 6+ years. And it has been a very interesting service, and I have enjoyed it immensely. One of the things I've enjoyed has been the partnership of the council in helping me to create the most diverse zoning board that has served in the city ever, by age and by gender and by racial and ethnic background and by neighborhood background. And so I thank the council and the mayor for that. It's been a good process. I've also focused on trying to add as many people with professional backgrounds onto the council as possible, and have been supported both by this committee and by the full council and by the mayor. And while this means that people are very busy, it also means that we're getting exactly, I think, who we all want, which are the leaders of the future and the people who are busy because they get things done. And so those two things I think have been very helpful. The role of the BZA has changed significantly over time. And when I came in, we were still under the old zoning, and therefore the BZA was a board that was doing the exact opposite of what it should be doing under state statute, which is we were being called upon to say yes to too many projects. And the BZA is supposed to be the board that says no, or gives a very small yes when things are put in front of us. And through the rezoning, and then also by scrupulously following the applicable law, the role of the board has changed dramatically. And I think it's changed for the better. And, you know, obviously, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions about that, whether you agree or not. But that, I think, overall is sort of how we got to where we are now. I think what I'll say now is that in the past, the largest variety of cases that came before the board were to ask for these things called use variances because our zoning was so, to put it bluntly, screwed up. And these are things that should have only been granted in 1% or less than cases, but the board previous to the one that I've been chairing for the last 6 years used to grant these things routinely and against the weight of the law, precedent, and in many cases, the best interest of the city. That's changed. And while that's been a hard transition for a lot of people in the community because they were used to just coming in and doing things that way, I think it's better for the city, and it's helped us to grow in a manner that is much better, because if you're a developer coming to Albany now, you don't have to guess what you have to do to build, because the thing that you're looking at that you think can support an apartment building is really zoned for a 2-family house. Let me stop there, and if that's enough, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer all questions.
Okay, thank you. And we'll start with committee members. Questions from committee members. Tom.
Yeah, hi, Rich. Can you give me a little bit? I really don't. I think I met you once before with Richard, Councilman Conti. What's your background? Are you from Albany? Are you where did you go to school? Would you mind sharing?
I was actually born in Brooklyn, but I grew up in Ulster County, so I'm not used to a big city like Albany. The kids that I went to high school with might not seem like a big city, but we went either to Kingston, or if we wanted to get a really good possibility of getting clothing or shoes, we come up to Albany for the mall previous to the Northway Mall and all that kind of stuff. So I grew up, I've lived essentially half my life in upstate in the country and half my life in cities. My background going to school and such like that is I went to Onteora Central School for high school, for any of those here who know about Ulster County. College at Fordham, CLC, like my council member, Rich Conti, University of Wisconsin Law School, NYU for graduate degrees, all that kind of stuff. So I have a background in public policy, a background in law, and I work in the field of utility law, which also has a lot to do with land use.
Okay. I'm very impressed. And so when you went to NYU, I guess you lived in the city then,
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So you have that. I'm from Queens. One of the reasons I moved to Albany 32 years ago was, I didn't like the way the city was going. I worked on Wall Street 10 years. And I wanted, when I came up to Albany, I found it was like very suburban, very country. So now I represent the 15th ward, which is mostly single family homes. We've had problems. The residents, and I know one of the council members is making fun of the people I represent, that they want to see their property retain its value, and they want to see the area the way it was. And I understand that, like nothing stays the same. Everything needs to change, but it's the speed of the change. I don't know if you have a family. I have a 13-year-old son, born and bred in Albany. I can't say that, but people like to say that a lot. But even he comments to me, Dad, where, all the lots are being built up. When I'm growing up, where's the empty lots? I remember down in Queens, we used to play baseball. We used to be able to go a couple blocks away. There'd be a big empty space. You could play baseball, you could play football. They're all gone. I mean, and we have, huge buildings. So I guess, I'm just trying to get that out that
Mhm.
the city is 15 wards. They're all different, but yet we're part of Albany. And, my feeling is I'd like to see a little bit more planning going 15, 20 years into the future. And hopefully we can get that. But I want to know what you think of Stumpies. Do you think that's, how long can they last? And, what do you think of that type of building?
Honestly, I don't know how to address that, because I think that one of the things that we're seeing now for the past 5 or 6 years is we're seeing people coming here for the same reason that you came here 30 years ago and I came here relatively recently at 20 years ago, which is it is inexpensive. It has a small town feel in the sense that my neighborhood in Brooklyn had, where everybody knew me, and in Queens, we as a Brooklyn boy, we never went to Queens. If we wanted to go to the country, we would ride our bicycles to the Staten Island Ferry and go to Staten Island, where there was nothing built back then. Sorry, Rich, I know that was your place. But I like that kind of thing. And to be quite honest, I mean, having lived in a couple of other cities, density can be a very good thing for cities. It supports the amenities that we all want together. And I think your point about long-range planning is a very important one. I mean, we have the Albany 2030 plan, and I think that saw a lot of input from all the communities. But if we're all thinking that Albany is changing too quickly for us, or that it's changing in ways that we don't like, and I mean ways about which we can opine legally without without straying into an area where we're saying, I don't like you living in my neighborhood, but I do like you. No one wants that.
No.
But if we're talking about your neighborhood that you represent now, which in a way is very much like most of Queens, like single family houses and a little space in between them, maintaining that's what people accuse Center Square, where Rich lives, of wanting to be, to be like Delmar in the city. And that may or may not be good, but I think all of our neighborhoods can benefit from some careful planning. One of the greatest resources that we have in Albany is our small town feel. But one of the things that contributes to that is our incredible historic architecture. And so to the extent that we save the things that matter, I think that makes us better as a city. To the extent that we work together and confront our challenges together, whether it be long-term planning or whether it be short-term, oh my gosh, that's a mistake to go in that area. When we do these things together, I think we come out better. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's a fine line between the two. But my big question was, I don't like the new architecture of buildings where you have a cement base or cement block base, one or two stories, usually parking, and then it's all like wood. It's all pressed board wood that, when talking to architects and stuff, has a 30 to 40 year life cycle. So, at some point, these buildings are going to have to come down, and the landfill is closing. I mean, that's part of my long-term feeling that, what do we do with all the vinyl siding? I mean, we know it's toxic. I hate vinyl siding, but that's a cheap way to put affordable housing. So, just that. Just the last thing, just a fast comment. Chase Manhattan Bank opened up on Homestead and Western Avenue, and
Congratulations.
Really, yeah, I mean, they did a great job. I know there was pushback because of the number of parking spaces, but it just goes to show that with a little creativity, how good 23 parking spaces with all the lawn and the bushes and stuff, what a great job they did. So thank you, and thanks the board for approving that project. Have a great night.
Thank you, you too.
Okay, other committee members, comments or questions? Alfredo.
Thank you. And thank you for your years of service on the board. I'm gonna ask this question now to all of the candidates. It has to do with moral justice. And how you make decisions based on where certain projects go in our neighborhoods and in our community. As I represent the 11th ward, that is a minority majority district. It has a large part of Central Avenue. And what I've seen is an open community, a community that's kind and that's open and that has allowed a lot of special needs programs to this community. But now it seems that this is the place everyone feels that's where they should go. And when you already have challenges and when you already have difficult situations that you're trying to address as a community, you would hope that the BCA, you would hope that the planning department and the planning board will look at projects and make sure that every community gets their fair share. Because I feel sometimes some communities get a more burdensome share of the developmental programs versus the economically benefiting programs. So, and I know there's a controversial one on Central Avenue that I'll say it if no one else will say it. I don't think it would have ever been approved on Western Avenue, but it was approved for Central Avenue. And it was a project that, in my view, would have a negative effect on the individuals and would take advantage of the communities. So my question is, how are you, as someone that's been there for some time, going to ensure that decisions are made not just by what the zoning is, but also by what's morally correct and what's just for communities that have already had their fair share of certain initiatives?
That's a very good question. And as someone who lives in downtown Albany and was president of the neighborhood association and actually was the person who did the codes and zoning advocacy, not only for my neighborhood, but also for the South End and for the, a bunch of other neighborhoods and through Cana. I think we all feel in the downtown wards that we've been overloaded with services that are not necessarily other parts of the city being put here, but that other parts of the county. And that we've gotten a reputation for being the place to put certain kinds of things, because then it won't, and I won't pick any of the hill towns in general, but that it's better to put it here than it is to put it out there. It won't change our neighborhood as much because we're kind of used to it, or I don't know how you want to say that. And for a long period of time, my neighborhood has been the place where the zoning board used to put 4 a.m. bars, and the previous administration used to push late night activity down here, despite the fact that it was wrecking our neighborhood. So I certainly hear what you're saying. I think to some extent, while I believe that the council can be active on those issues, it's also something that the council and the neighborhoods have to advocate very strongly with the state legislature, because some of the things that allow congregate support housing of various types to come into our neighborhoods, and they come into my neighborhood as much as they do into yours, council member, are set by state law. And so, talking to the state legislature and making them listen, sharing your story with them and sharing the story of your constituents is one way to keep the city from being put into a position where we're constrained by state law to not block certain kinds of projects. And quite honestly, from a moral standpoint, yes, we don't want to overload neighborhoods with things that are going to harm the neighborhood character. At the same time, I would be very uncomfortable with pointing out those people shouldn't be in this neighborhood, because there are many of us who have children with developmental disabilities. My kids are old enough that whatever happens in our neighborhood doesn't matter as much to them anymore. But who are we going to point the finger at? People with developmental disabilities, or people with substance abuse problems, some of whom are to be pitied or embraced, some of whom are may not be salvageable by us because they should be in their own home community as opposed to being put here. It's kind of a larger question, I think, than we can answer easily in the board without working together with you, the council, and our state elected officials to try and deal with it. What we do is what I told the council 6 years ago I would do when I got into this position, which is I would apply the law. Whatever the law says that we have to do, I would do it. And I would try as much as possible to make sure that the outcome was the best for the city, for the whole city, for every neighborhood, but that we were going to follow the law. And occasionally that would mean that we might all be a little unhappy. Does that answer your question, council member?
Go ahead, Alfredo.
It does a bit, but it does give me some concern as well, because I think if we're talking about needing to change the law, then maybe we should have a conversation about what laws should we change locally. New York City has a law that says the Fair Share Act, which specifically addresses this issue so that, you know, not all special needs programs go into certain communities, so that some communities, so you share the burden. And that's not always positive because people on the Upper West Side don't want to, you know, may complain about the fact that they have now special program initiatives there as well. But you know what? That's fair. That's fair. And it shouldn't just be put on the burden on certain communities. And that's what has happened for decades. And that's what needs to change, because if you want to actually build these communities, you actually want to develop these communities, you have to allow them to have an opportunity to grow and not just saturate them with the, you know, these type of initiatives.
I think that's a very good point. And let me point out, council member, that I have some background with as a legislative director, council, and a bunch of other things working for both houses of the state legislature. And I'm happy to sit down with you and any other members of the council who might want to talk about changing state law, because your power as a legislative body to set the zoning rules for the city of Albany comes from the state. The things that bind you from taking certain kinds of actions and that tell us what we must do come from the state and the courts. So I think you're right. We're going to have to sit down and change the law. And I'm happy to sit down with anybody on the council and with you in particular, since you're one of our neighboring wards and we experience some of the same problems. Happy to sit down and try and fix it.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Committee members, I think we're all set for questions. Other council members, Richard.
Thank you, Rich. By the way, I grew up on Staten Island. I think you know this, before the bridge, and some people will know what that means. So there is a training requirement, like continuing training requirement in law. And we got some information regarding the other two reappointees, regarding their completion of training, which doesn't really go back to the beginning of their term, so it's not really complete. But we didn't have anything on your side, and I wonder what if you had completed the required hours of training.
Yeah, I generally, and forgive me, I didn't mean to talk over the end.
Yeah.
Did you finish?
No, yes, go ahead.
Okay, my apologies. Generally, what I have done is I have taken the courses that are offered by the CDRPC, the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. And then I've also usually tried to also do, Pace University has an advanced land use law and policy program down in White Plains. And then, and I swear only for the advanced curriculum, I go to the one in Saratoga Springs during the racing meet, because they're one of the few upstate that have advanced classes. This year has been a little bit, I confess, a little bit difficult to do that for a couple of reasons. First, a lot of places have had difficulty switching over to online live training. So I've done this year credits through the Department of State, and they're online. And unfortunately, the local government center at the Department of State, which has a tremendous training program, focuses more on training for new members of the boards, because people are always turning over on the planning boards and zoning boards. And so you have to look relatively carefully to find advanced things. So for example, this year, I did a course on making a better record for the zoning board. Another one on comprehensive on seeker, because I haven't looked at seeker law in a long time, and we don't dive into that in the zoning board very much. And then, what was the other one I did? I forgot the third one, but I did a third one there too. And in addition to that, we did an ethics class with Professor Patty Saukin from the Albany Law School, who's now at, I think, Touro College, Amy? Yeah. And on top of that, I also do an amount of, a fairly large amount of continuing legal education courses that are in the area of public utilities, which is where I practice. That's all about land use. But I confess that this year, I want to be very careful about allocating any of those credits over to the CEUs that we have to do on an annual basis for the board, because I'm not sure at this point if I have enough credits that I need to put forward for the state courts in 60 days to be renewed with my license for this year. So I was behind where I would have liked to have been. I am, I think, better than in good shape for this year, and I need to sit down with Brad and make sure I have all the credits going back to the last time that I was able to go to Pace University in person, and same thing in Saratoga.
So those will be filed with the city clerk prior to our council meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I was looking at trying to get a sense of, the role of the BZA has changed significantly since we adopted the USDO. Many times I was before the old BZA opposing some of those use variances that we've talked about. And I was looking at trying to get a sense as to how often you met and how long your meetings were. And, with the archiving the meetings on YouTube nowadays, you can get a sense as to how long you met. And a number of them actually are not very long. A number of them are for the most part, they're under an hour. There are a couple of exceptions, but there are several like are 15, 20 minutes or something along those lines. So the role has significantly changed since we adopted the USDO, which, can you talk a little bit about what do you have left? Is it basically use variances, area variances, and interpretations?
So we have,
the variances nowadays, because I think the USDO really cleared up a lot of those cases.
yeah, and I think that's accurate. So we have three primary types of things that we see now. We get interpretations of one kind or another. We get a large number, and I guess the bulk of our action as the zoning board now is area variances of one type or another. We treat signs as area variances. We treat fences as area variances. So we do fences, we do signs, and we frequently do various types of setbacks. And I think we haven't gotten a use variance in a while for a bunch of reasons. First, the development of the USDO was designed to limit the necessity to do use variances because they made it difficult for people to invest in Albany. But also because, again, it's very hard to get a use variance. And, I voted yes on one use variance in 6 years. And that was more, honestly, than I thought I was going to vote yes for. So those are the three cases we do most of. We have had one nuisance case, and I presume we could do more of those. We have had a few cases where people were ticketed and then fined by the sanitation department of the city. And so we still get those. So we still have our original jurisdiction that the council gave us and transferred over. And it's my understanding that Councilmember Hoy and others would like us to take back some of the things that we were doing, either on the issue of waivers and perhaps on interpretations. And I think your point is a good one, which is that meetings that used to go on for a fairly long period of time because many people wanted to try and opine on the use variance issue, which was a use coming to a neighborhood that never should have been allowed to come there. That no longer occurs at the zoning board. And so that sort of thing is much more rare for us.
Okay. And of course, the council's opportunity to do an assessment of the USDO hasn't happened because the annual reviews that were meant to set that stage haven't been happening either. So that's another different issue, though. I've been going back and also trying to get a sense in terms of some of the issues that have come before the board, and I was looking at the minutes that were kept, and there's a huge gap. In fact, I can't see any minutes past the February meeting that were posted online, which would indicate what actions were taken and attendance and things of that nature. So.
Do you have a question?
I was just wondering if that was just not posted or if that's something that's not happening.
I think it's entirely likely that they haven't been reduced to written format and posted. since we obviously, we digitally tape everything and we video everything at this point in time.
Right, though that's not a substitute for written minutes. But otherwise, didn't really have any questions. I, appreciate your service and what you've been able to do in terms of bringing the board forward and dealing with issues in a appropriate way. So look forward to your continued service.
Thank you. And I look forward to doing the 6-month review this year.
Okay, thanks.
There's several
Owusu,
of those.
I'm sorry, Owusu, you have some questions.
Yes, just want to say thank you, Richard, for your years of service to the city and your continued work that you do. Work together in the past where you're truly a gift for the city of Albany and all the work that you do for zoning and also for the city as a whole. My question, I have two questions more so. My first one is, what are some of the misconceptions that individuals, particularly in government or just neighborhoods, have as relates to your position or just the zoning board? And the second question is more so, what do you see the vision as it relates to the zoning board as the head of the zoning board in the direction that you're going?
Yep. Thank you, Council Member, for both of those questions. One of the most common misconceptions was that that we were the board that was key to development in the city of Albany, and that if the board sneezed, that development would stop. And that may have been more true under the Jennings administration, quite candidly, but it's not what the zoning board ever should have been. The zoning board is designed to say no. And where a project is able to meet a reasonable threshold to say yes, but, and then to make sure that whatever the project is, that it doesn't harm the neighborhood that it's going into or move the city backwards from its comprehensive plan. So I think that was one of the biggest misconceptions that people had. I guess one of the other common misconceptions was that we had more power than we have under both the zoning code of the city and under state law, where our actions are constrained by state law. We're constrained to do all sorts of things. And, to the extent that we try and depart from those legal constraints, when we get sued, the city loses. My goal as the chair has been that we win every single case where we get sued over something, and that we win it in a way that people don't bring it again. And as an example was when the homeless drop-in center was proposed up in one of the upper wards a bunch of years ago. And it was being represented by some people in the neighborhood as being a homeless shelter, which it was not. It was a place where their children could receive services while they were out looking for employment, and people could clean up and the kids could play and then people could go interview. And so, we decided that case in a way that kept the city from being placed in the scrutiny of the religious land use law that was passed, I think, under the Reagan administration, which would have thrown away much of our ability to control the way that our city moved forward. And we also did it in such a way that it was clear that, children are not a harm to a neighborhood, and that people getting work and being able to pay their bills don't harm the city. And I think that the outcome in that case is very clear about that. As far as vision for the board, I think that's something that the council has a lot of control over, because you can tell us what you want us to do in the future, even through the 6-month review process or through talking to us. But I think generally the board should continue to reflect the way that the city looks, the level of education that we have as a city, who we are. And I think that in partnership with the council, the board now looks much more like the city looks. We represent more neighborhoods than we used to represent. I think that, over the next year or two, and hopefully it won't be much longer than that, we will take into account all of the concerns of the council and neighborhoods that could have been met during the review and will be met during it now. And that's one of the big projects that I look forward to working with both the council and corporation council and the planning board on. But I think it's more about making sure that people, when they come before the board, that they understand exactly what the scope is of what we can do and what we're allowed to do, but also, that we're better together. When we work together on these sorts of things, we come out with a better outcome.
Okay, I just want to point out that President Pro Tem Kelly Kimbrough is also here. And I'd like to move forward and ask committee members if there is a motion anyone would like to put on the table. Okay, Councilmember Love, go ahead. You're muted.
I put a motion on the floor to reappoint. I'm not feeling good, so I didn't catch his name.
Oh, sorry, Richard Berkeley.
Richard Berkeley.
All right, and
Second.
okay, Councilmember Hoey seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Again, unanimous, and thank you,
Thank you.
Richard, for your service to the city these past 6 years, and we're extremely grateful you're willing to continue to serve in this capacity. And thank you for appearing before us tonight as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, and it's a pleasure to serve.
Take care.
Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you. You too. All right. Council members, our next person we're going to interview is Serena Joyce White Lake, and this is also a reappointment. Let's see. Serena's appointment tonight would be through the year 2021. I've got lists and lists here, so. So if you could welcome Serena. Hello, Serena.
Hello, how are you? How's everyone?
Very well. I'm Kathy Fahey, Chair of the committee, and we're very glad you could come tonight. We want to start by thanking you for your service to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And what we'd like to do is ask you to talk a little bit about your service and why you wish to continue. Tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Okay.
And then we'll go around and ask a few questions.
Sounds good. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time and for your service, each and every one of you in your respective roles. I'm originally from Hollis, Queens, New York, and I went to Queens College, and then I went to Fordham Law School. I moved to Albany about 10 years ago to clerk for the New York State Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in New York State. And upon moving up here, I loved Albany and the friends that I made and the cost of living. So I decided to stay. After leaving my clerkship, I began working for the New York State Office of Children and Family Services as an assistant counsel in the, I do labor and employment. I practice labor and employment law in the Employment Law Bureau of, or I should say unit of OCFS. I'm also a licensed real estate broker, and I perform real estate closings. One of my mentors was Judge Theodore Jones Jr. of the Court of Appeals. May he rest in peace. And he is the person who encouraged me to get into doing closings. I now teach as an adjunct professor at Albany Law School, real estate transactions, keeping that going. And while here, I began working with a lot of community groups, including the African American Cultural Center and the Center for Law and Justice. And that's how I was able to meet some great people in Albany. I began serving on the Board of Zoning Appeals in 2017, and I have thoroughly enjoyed the experience. Richard Berkeley, as you all have just spoken to, has been a great mentor and leader and teacher, and he's really set the bar for the board in terms of doing the homework and understanding Albany and the reasons why we make our decisions. And I originally lived in the Center Square area. Now I live in Ward 15 with in the area that Councilman Hoey represents. And I love these single family homes out here. And being on the board, I've learned a great deal about land use and why certain neighborhoods are invested in different projects. I've got to meet great people. I've enjoyed the training, and I really have enjoyed the experience and meeting the different people on the board. Also working closely with our council. Right now I see Amy, who is on the meeting, and she's been absolutely invaluable. So thank you, Amy. She really is brilliant, and she has really helped us, and so has Brad Glass. So it's been a great experience. And I think we've made a smooth transition over to using Zoom quite well, which I was kind of nervous about in March, along with many other things. And so I am honored to serve in this capacity. Albany is home, and I plan to be here for a long time. So I'm excited at the possibility of continuing to serve on the board.
Okay, thank you, Serena. So we'll start with committee members. Questions from committee members. I see Councilmember Hoey.
Hi, Serena. It's good to see you. I'm from Queens too, Maspeth, Queens, and I moved up here, 32 years ago, and I love it. And I told the other people who applied that, I'd like to. I'm not against development, but I'd like to slow it down a little, and according to the area where it's happening. I don't want to see every empty lot filled in my generation. And like I've said before, I have a 13-year-old son, and maybe, it'd be nice when he grows up. He wants to be an architect, that if he might want to design houses and stuff and the space to build, up here. So, but thank you for your service on the board. I really want to thank you because the one time I came in front of the BZA that I remember was about the Chase Bank that is now open on Homestead and Western, and you were part of that decision, and I don't know if you've seen it yet. It is beautiful how they did it. So make sure you drive up there and take a peek at it. It's really good. It makes the neighborhood look good. So thank you for your service.
Thank you. And I have seen that Chase Manhattan Bank. It is lovely with the purple LED lights. And I agree with what you said in terms of the parking lot really fitting in, because there was some conversation about whether or not that should be allowed. And I think they just did an amazing job. And it seems in a pretty record time, right? It seems like they did it overnight, which they didn't, but it is beautiful. So I totally agree with you on that.
And they used good materials. The way they built that, they used real plywood. They didn't use particle board. They was really well constructed, and it just fits in. So thank you again. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Ballerin.
Thank you. Thank you for your time on the board. Again, you have all the credentials, you've got the education, you've got the experience, and we're lucky to have someone with that background, willing to serve. So we thank you for that, and I appreciate that. I'm going to ask you the same question that I'm asking all the candidates, it has to do with more right. I understand that the board makes some difficult decisions, and you've got to make some tough decisions, but there seems to be, and it's historic, situation where certain communities get certain development and other communities get other type of development, and certain communities get an unfair burden of special needs initiatives. And one that the board had to do with placed a entity on Central Avenue that I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't think that would have ever gone on Western Avenue. I don't think that would have ever gone, in Guilderland. And I know you're looking at the city of Albany, but my point is that wouldn't have gone in some communities, but they were placing it in different communities, and that's not fair. Our communities already have enough struggles. We already have enough challenges. So I guess my question to you is the same that I've asked everybody else. How can you balance, those more justice issues with, the different projects that you see in front of you?
I think that's a really, really important question. And I definitely have an appreciation for the issues that you're raising. As part of my studies and what I teach my class, I teach them about redlining. And I know that redlining happened across the country and in the city of Albany. There's plenty of articles about that online. And a lot of the neighborhoods that have been historically redlined in Albany are the neighborhoods where we're seeing a lot of turmoil. And I don't think a lot of people are making the connection between government-sponsored racial segregation redlining and the ails of these communities. And I think that we could, going forward, perhaps factor that into every decision that we make in terms of looking at the numbers and analyzing what kinds of projects are being permitted in the lower wards versus in the upper wards, and really looking into that and seeing, is there a trend that is not at the top of our thinking, and it should be, and to really study that, because as you said, we're seeing more and more projects and more development. And that's an analysis that's very important to people. It affects people's lives. As was mentioned, it could affect people's health, their breathing, their air, in terms of what kinds of entities are allowed to exist in certain places. I know that in all of our meetings, we've had very deep discussion, that we've been provided with documents. We've heard from both professionals and community members. And then I think we as a board, in working with the Common Council, could possibly think about, changes going forward, like in terms of allowing more people to speak, or more time for community members to speak, and factoring in that analysis into each and every one of our decisions, because I think that's absolutely right. And I think now, in the aftermath of America watching George Floyd be murdered by police, and the country coming into a time of reckoning, and really dealing with systematic racism, and all of that, that we do have to have this appreciation and analysis in all the decisions that we make across the boards and the committees and all the work that we're doing here. So I think that's an extremely important question, and I will definitely keep that at the front of my thinking if allowed to continue to serve.
Thank you.
Awusa, do I see your hand?
No, I was just clapping.
Oh, I didn't recognize a clap. I'm sorry. Any other questions or comments by council members? Okay, well, I think what I'd like to ask is if someone could put a motion on the floor. Councilmember Hoey.
Yeah, I move that we appoint Serena Joyce Whitelake to the term. I think it's going to end in 2021 is
Yes.
what you had said. So I move that we favorably move her out of committee.
Do we have a second on that motion? Alfredo Ballerin. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it is unanimous. And Serena, again, thank you for your service. We deeply appreciate it. Thank you for your willingness to continue to serve, and thank you for appearing before us tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, we are moving along. We're running a little late here. Let's see who is next on the list is Rika Rice Gill, and I'll have to ask her for her pronunciation of her name. If you could welcome Rika. Hello, Rika. I'm Kathy Fahey, chair of the committee. Thank you so much for coming. And if you could pronounce your name correctly so I don't continue to slaughter it.
My name is Regia Rice.
Regia. Regia, thank you.
If you forget about the C, you won't mispronounce it again.
All right, very good, Regia.
Yes.
Well, Regia, thank you so much for your interest in serving on the Board of Zoning Appeals. What we'd like to do is give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit, about your background and why you would like to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then we'll go around and ask a few questions.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Regia Rice, and thank you for having me tonight. A little bit about myself. I work in City Hall. I'm actually upstairs in the City Court building, in chambers with the judges. I have lived in the Capital Region since 1998. I went to college and law school here, and I'm very invested in the area. I look forward to and I enjoy seeing the Capital Region grow and develop as it has since the 90s. And I am interested in being on the planning board and getting more involved in and active in the city and how we go forward with growing our city.
Okay, so what we'll do now is go around. We'll start with committee members who might have questions or comments. Anybody have any questions for Regia? Councilmember Hoey.
Hi, Regia.
Hi.
Thank you for coming. So you had said that, can I ask you where you came from originally?
I am originally from Queens, New York.
Okay. What part?
Corona, Queens, a couple
Okay.
blocks from Shea Stadium.
Shea Stadium. I used to ride my bike there when I was a kid. I'm from Maspeth, Queens, Maspeth Woodside. And one of the reasons I love it up here is, I came up here. I had a dog. I couldn't find an apartment. Nobody would rent me an apartment. And I ended up out in the country, out in Westerlo, actually. And then I was commuting. I worked at the university and commuting in, and I saw the house that I'm in now, 32 years ago, on the way. And I liked it because it was, I was coming from the country where it's like farms and cows, but it was very suburban. And now I represent the people in my neighborhood, and they are kind of nervous about change. They like single family homes. They like a safe neighborhood. Our crime rate is very low, and we are a diverse community. And but anyhow, it's important, I think, for anybody who sits on the BZA to listen to the neighborhoods. And I just hope that you will be open-minded when you are there, listening to the concerns that the people have. So thank you so much for your willingness to serve.
Certainly.
Other questions? Richard Conti, go ahead.
Thanks. And this actually might be a question for Amy. So Rita, you work for the city court or the unified court system? Would you be considered a city employee or a state employee?
I am a state employee.
Okay, because that gets to another issue there about city employees on the BZA.
Right. I am a state employee. I'm just located in City Hall.
Right. This unified court system thing works. I actually see you have a lot of experience in terms of administrative hearings and appeals, which would be really well suited for the BZA in terms of what they do. So that's really impressed with that. Did you have any planning background or anything like that?
I do not have a directly planning background, but I used to, before I started working for the court system, I was a landlord tenant attorney for quite some time. And so I'm familiar with the zoning ordinances and things like that, and defending or representing my clients.
Okay, great. But I just did note your experience in terms of administrative hearings, which I think is really relevant and might be a good fit. So thank you.
Thank you.
Other council members, Alfredo.
Thank you, and thank you again for your willingness to serve. Your background will serve as well, and your education will serve as well. The question and comment that I'm making to all candidates is, when you are making these decisions, when you're looking at these decisions, how much does moral justice play in your decision making? Like I've stated before, and I may sound like a broken record now, but there are some neighborhoods to get some type of development and other neighborhoods to get other type of development. Some neighborhoods, you never think of putting certain initiatives in, and then other neighborhoods, are flooded with those type of special need programming. And I represent the 11th ward, which I think is more than fair share of those type of initiatives. So when you're making these decisions of how you allow certain institutions and certain programs into our community, I ask that you think about the fairness, and that some neighborhoods already have a heavy burden when it comes, and some have a light burden. I'm not sure how much, again, you're not on the board, so it'll be all, fresh and new, which is good, which is what we need. I think sometimes it's good to have some new ideas, new people on board. But how would you be able to balance those difficult decisions?
Well, like all of you, I have a vested interest in the capital region. And I understand how diverse our region is, and I appreciate how diverse our region is personally. I live downtown, but I enjoy farming and planting and gardening. So I enjoy both worlds, both the buildings and development part of it, and also the parts of our city that are not developed, and places where we can go and do things like apple picking or whatever we do here as upstaters that we enjoy in our region. And so as a court employee, I am trained to be balanced, to be quite honest. It's my job. That is what I will always do, listen to the evidence or the information in front of me, and also have a great respect for my colleagues and listen to what my colleagues have to say about whatever it is that is presented in front of us, and make a determination based on that.
Thank you.
Other questions by council members? Okay, Regia, I was wondering if you had any questions for us at all. Do you have a good sense of what the responsibilities of somebody serving on this board have, and so on?
I think I do, yes. I'm familiar with the board and the decisions of the board. I am ready, willing, and able to get started.
Okay, wonderful. Then I will ask council members, as committee members, if someone would like to put a motion forth.
I put a motion forth that we pass Regia Rice out of committee with affirmative recommendation.
And do we have a second? Council member Love. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, unanimous. Very good. Regia, again, we thank you so much for your willingness to serve in this role, and we wish you the very best of luck, and it's great to meet you as well.
Thank you, same here. Great to meet you all. I look forward to it.
Okay, thanks so much.
Have a good night.
You too. And I'd like it if we could invite our next candidate in, Jeff Quain. All right, hello, Jeff. This is Kathy Fahey, chair of the committee. There he is. And welcome. Thanks for your willingness to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals. What we'd like to do is ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in serving on the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then we'll go around and ask you a few questions.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman. It's a pleasure to talk with you all again. I know we spoke not too long ago at a different committee meeting. My name is Jeff Quain. I am a resident here in Albany. I moved to Albany from Binghamton, New York in the Southern Tier about 9 years ago. I started my career in the legislature, which is what originally brought me to the city of Albany. After that, I had the opportunity to join Governor Cuomo's administration as his Capital Region representative and Deputy Director of Regional Affairs, which is where I met many of you and spoke with many of you and worked with many of you. And I recently left the administration to join a firm based out of Albany called J Strategies. I'm looking to join the board to share my experience that I've had working at different levels of government, and also give back to my community, serve my community. I've followed closely the different development that's happened since you all passed the USDO a couple years back. And, I think it's really been a remarkable turn with some of the development we've seen. And, I'm certainly aware of some of the concerns that have been raised about that development as well. But I am looking for the opportunity to serve and get back and be a part of the momentum that we have here in the city of Albany.
Terrific. So we'll go around now. We'll start with committee members. Questions for Jeff? Councilmember Ballerin.
I'll switch it up on you this time, Tom. I'll go first. Jeff, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Councilman. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So I'm going to ask you the same question I'm asking all the candidates. It has to do with in balancing the difficult decisions that need to be made at the board level with social justice and more justice when it comes to some of our communities. Some of our communities have been saturated with the special needs type of programs and initiatives. And this openness and kindness of these communities have now placed them in a situation where they see a magnet. They seem to be a magnet for these type of initiatives. And these neighborhoods have had more than their fair share of these type of programs. And how do you balance that when you hear residents say, why my neighborhood again? Why would you put something on Central Avenue that you would never think of putting on Western Avenue? Why in my community, when we already have been open and kind and willingness to allow others, why do you continue to saturate our neighborhoods that are trying to develop and grow just like every other community? So my question is, how will you balance the difficult decisions you need to make, as well with the numbers, the numbers and the data that shows that some of our neighborhoods have just been clearly saturated with these type of initiatives, and there should be a fair share within all communities.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. I am familiar a bit with what you're talking about. When I was with the governor's office, I heard from the mayor's administration, other elected officials who spoke about their frustration with a lot of these services being placed on Central Ave, in areas where we saw a congregate of these type of services, and, just the detrimental effects that it had on the neighborhood, bringing other issues with it, acting as a magnet, as you've said, for different things. And I hear the frustration, and, it's a little confusing when, for so long, we wanted to have these type of services all in one place. And, a couple years back, there was a real push for more services in the communities. And that seemed to happen in a lot of places, except in our city centers in Albany, where these different type of services, whatever they may be, are still congregated in our cities in certain areas. And a lot of those are state decisions. I think, in my view, I think that we should see what we can do to separate those services, put them in different areas. And, I think it's also an equity issue. I think it's the wrong assumption to make that everyone in these communities along Central Ave are the ones who are using the services, because I'm sure there's folks in other areas of the cities that also need them that might have a difficult time getting to them. So as a member of the board, I would want to work with the mayor's administration, work with the communities to see what can we do on the local level to push out those services into different communities where they are needed, instead of centering them in one specific area where we've seen a number of them.
Good answer. And I expect nothing less from you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember Conti. I'll start with Councilmember Hall, committee member.
Yeah, I'd use the electronic hand. Hi,
Oh,
Jeff. How are you?
Great to do, Councilmember.
So, like I've told the other, appointees or people coming up for appointment to the board, I come from Queens, 32 years ago, and to work at the university. And, I like the ruralness of the area. I like the deep city. You can jump on a bus and you can be downtown in 15, 20 minutes. I represent a neighborhood that people don't want to be that inner city. They want to be kind of suburban. We're on the borders of Bethlehem and Guilderland. And we'd like to see, and I agree with them, we'd like to see the type of development that fits the area. Now, what's your feelings? And just do you know what a stumpy is?
I'm not familiar with that, no.
Okay. A stumpy is a building that's going around now. They're like East German type of buildings where you have a cement base and then 6 or 7 stories, wood, press board, put together. They're meant to last maybe 30, 40 years if you're lucky. There's problems in my mind that when we don't think about what happens when these buildings outlive their usefulness, where do they go? I mean, the dump is closing, it'll be closed within our lifetime. What do we do with the material and stuff when these buildings have to come down? So that's my first concern. The big thing, and I'm hoping, and I ask all the applicants, is that you do listen to the neighborhood. There's a council member, in pink or red right now, who makes fun of the people in my neighborhood because they invested and they want to see it. They don't want to see super major change. They want to see a gradual change thought out. And, I had brought up previously long-term planning, 20, 30 years down. Now we have the Albany 2030 plan. We only got 9 years left on that. So, so I guess my thoughts are, I kind of heard at a previous meeting that you were at, and I think you're for density and stuff, but we see the problem with density right now with COVID. And New York City is having a real problem with all the apartments and stuff that they built down there. The rents are dropping because they can't get people to live in it. And people don't want to live in density, in dense areas because of the spread of this disease. And hopefully we'll have a vaccine, but what happens when the next disease hits and stuff like that? So there's got to be a balance, of course, but I just want to know what your thoughts are on development.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you, Councilman. And, I don't know if you're familiar with Binghamton, but it's certainly a little bit different than Queens or the city of Albany. It's a lot of what I'd say looks like your district, single family homes, not very dense development once you get out of the city center. And I think development is important. I think it also should be neighborhood appropriate. It certainly is not a one size fit all type thing. We have many areas of the city where, development should be encouraged and it's very important, but I think it is important to take a look at the characteristics of the neighborhood, whether it's, historic, family, residential, single family, 2-family, that type of thing, and take that into consideration, certainly when we're making our decisions. The USDO was great in, cutting a lot of the red tape that held up development here. And I think we're seeing some of the benefits of that. However, that shouldn't be, you know, a cookie cutter approach where we're just plopping different, you know, buildings in neighborhoods just because we can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Anani.
Sorry about that. I was just in a neighborhood association meeting also. Jeff, just, I know I was looking at your resume and you did say that you were the regional representative for the governor, and all throughout the region, what are you seeing as it relates to development, and where do you see Albany moving forward?
Yeah.
And also, what kind of experience would you bring to the zoning board? Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Councilman. Yeah, you know, it's, I think what we're seeing in a lot of the region is similar in some ways. You know, the ongoing renaissance in our city centers, Albany, Troy, Schenectady, you know, obviously they're all a bit different, but there's a lot of interest in redeveloping those city centers. And, you know, I think in some ways, there's a bit more attention on Troy. You know, they've always kind of had the, you know, Brooklyn of upstate, Monker, and that cool factor. And, you know, Schenectady's had a lot of the development recently that's really driven it forward. So I think, you know, there's a perception that Albany is a bit behind on it. However, you know, I don't think we are, and I don't think that's a fair assessment. I think a lot of the strengths that we have here are our history, you know, our different neighborhoods, and we can build upon that and, you know, really steal some of the limelight, if you will. Elsewhere in the region, you know, there are a lot of fights in more, I'd say, farming suburban areas, specifically Saratoga County, where, you know, as Councilman Hoey pointed out, you know, they want to put in these apartment buildings where the neighbors feel it's inappropriate, where it'll change the characteristic of the neighborhood that they've chose to live, where they're making their families. And it's, you know, I'm certainly aware of how controversial that is, and, you know, how frustrating it can be for the families. So, you know, we're seeing quite a lot of development and renaissance in our city centers, and, you know, some of that development expanding out into other neighborhoods where folks might not want to be quite in the city center. So I think it's a good position to be in, you know, certainly comparatively to some of the other regions of the state. So I want to use that experience that I've seen, you know, my interaction with elected officials, with community groups, not only in the city of Albany, but throughout the region, to act as a good steward of not only laws passed by the Common Council, but also as a city and our development.
Okay. Councilmember Conti.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So Jeff, a lot of your experience with your, you know, regional rep for the governor, a lot of some experience in the assembly. I spent a long time in the assembly also. Might be characterized as political experience. So I'm wondering, what do you see, and, you know, what insights you may have gotten, what do you see in your previous experience that would qualify you or make you a good or strong candidate for the BZA, dealing with some of the planning issues that come before them?
Yeah, thank you. You know, again, I'd say my experience working with community members as a consensus builder, as you know, working in the legislature for an elected official, especially the governor in some regions of our state, of our area, it's not easy. You know, you have to be a consensus builder. You have to figure out how to find common ground and work with folks. So I've had quite a bit of experience with that. And, you know, I've also worked with laws. I've worked with, you know, figuring out how to implement our laws, how to, you know, move things forward while following the spirit of what the elected officials want to put forward. So although I don't have, you know, the planning background, I certainly know how the law works. I understand that we want to look at the intent and figure out how we can best fulfill that. So it's, while it might be political experience, it's certainly governing experience as well, which is a big part of serving on boards.
And I know you're actually, is your, Kathy, the term of appointment here until the end of 2020? Anyway, you're muted.
I have 2021 here.
Okay. Because I know there were a couple that were through 2020, but I think the intent was that they would be reappointed.
Oh, yes, those were, that this would be their appointment now, that we're at the end of 2020 almost, so.
Okay, so we're actually going to reappoint Jeff, or appoint to a term that ends at the end in a month or so.
Yes, this would be for a one-year appointment, Jeff.
Okay.
Actually, I think
Just
it's
to
1 month.
be, pardon me? 2021.
Okay.
We have staggered appointments, so there's a little
There are some of
confusion.
them that are kind of weird, and I'm trying to, I think
We're trying to sort it out, so we apologize.
Yeah, you're 2021. Actually, there are 2 others that are just being appointed through the end of 2020 with the expectation that they'll be appointed to another 3-year term. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to turn to committee members. Would someone like to put a motion on the floor? Councilmember Ballerin.
I put a motion to appoint Jeff to the zoning board.
Okay, we have a second on that.
Second,
Second by Councilmember Hoey. All in favor?
aye.
Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. Jeff, thank you again for your willingness to serve. We wish you the best of luck. And it's been great talking to you tonight and finding out a little bit more about you and your interest in serving. So
Great.
thank you.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too. Okay, our last interviewee tonight is Councilmember Martin Daly, and this would be a reappointment. And the reappointment would be through, again, to 12/31/20, and then a reappointment to 12/31/23. Oh, there he is. Welcome, Martin.
Hello.
Great to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So, Martin, what we were hoping you could do is talk a little bit about your service on the Board of Zoning Appeals and why you would like to be reappointed, and then we'll go around and ask a few questions.
Sure. I'll do a little bit of background for folks that don't know me. My name is Martin Daly. I'm a resident of the Pine Hills neighborhood. I've owned a house here for 10 plus years. Resident of Albany. I hear so many people who have been attending the meeting who are from downstate, either from Queens or Brooklyn. I am from Albany. I went to School 19, went to Hackett Middle School, Albany High School, College of St. Rose, and also to the University of Albany, where I got my master's in regional planning. So if anybody wants a perspective on education in Albany, I'm your guy. I am the Director of Water Quality Programs for the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. You may be familiar with that organization because we offer several of the trainings that some of the board members have taken in order to stay sharp on their planning skills. In that capacity as Director of Water Quality Programs, I work with the City of Albany, the Village of Green Island, the City of Rensselaer, City of Troy, City of Cohoes, and City of Waterville on a combined sewer overflow abatement program, where the ultimate goal of that program is to reduce the combined sewer discharges that are fouling up the Hudson River, to work through that process. I was very excited to be selected and appointed to the Board of Zoning Appeals. I have a background in planning. I've practiced planning for more than a decade. In my current capacity, I've been a regional planner for 7 years with the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. and I work on local economic development and water quality issues with the commission. I have a background in developing trail systems and bike and pedestrian advocacy as well when I worked for Parks and Trails New York several years ago. My interest in serving on the Board of Appeals is twofold. One is because I love this community. I've been a resident of Albany for 40 years, and I very much appreciate the diversity and uniqueness of the city. Also, I have a unique perspective on the region as far as bringing a planning perspective. One of the things that encouraged me to go to planning, I kept seeing the great places in our suburban neighboring communities like Bethlehem and Guilderland get swallowed up by development. And meanwhile, here in Albany, we continue to have vacant land and underutilized buildings. On my block in particular, we have 2 vacant houses. And yet in the suburban communities, we have development that is being rallied against. So it's frustrating to see those inequities where Albany definitely needs investment and the suburban communities are frustrated by the level of development in those communities. And here we have what was essentially a broken system for 20 years as the region has not grown by very much. And yet we've seen land use grow by 4% or 4 times what the population growth has been. So being able to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals, I've been very excited to listen to cases, to adjudicate them, to work through the process when applicants come before us for variances or interpretations, because I think, number one, we are a relief valve when a project comes forward. And number two, it's being able to respond to the community interest, measure a project or proposal against the comprehensive plan and zoning, and be able to work through the process to determine if we're giving an applicant a fair shake.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
Mhm.
So we'll start with questions from committee members. Questions, comments. Tom?
Yeah, hi, Martin. Did you study under Ray Bromley by any chance?
I did.
Okay.
It was actually a conversation with Ray Bromley that encouraged me to get into planning school.
Okay, good.
I called him to ask about planning and I hung up the phone 3 hours later.
I know I talked to him, it's probably 2 years now, when I was battling this development up by me at 1211, and he felt it was the wrong spot. It should have been downtown or, in the inner city more than that. And, it's people have different opinions, of course, but I had a good conversation with him. One of the things I brought up with him, what I'd love to see is a regional planning, some kind of like a seminar or something where we bring in Troy, we bring in Schenectady, we bring in, Albany, we bring in the towns and do a long range plan for the community. Why should we be fighting each other? I hear this all the time. Well, Troy's doing this and getting this project and Schenectady's getting this project. It should be shared. And that's, again, my opinion. I'm just one person out of, 100,000 in the city of Albany. One of the things that I am concerned about, and you're here and you're looking for reappointment and stuff, and I'll bring it up. I've heard you talk about you want to see a walkable city, and the area I live is most of the people here are in their 70s and 80s, and actually my father-in-law is next door. He had a stroke. He's in a wheelchair. We have no sidewalks.
Sorry to hear that.
And thank you, but we have no sidewalks. I can't walk my son to school. He's born and bred in Albany. I'm not. I'm from Queens, like you probably heard. But I couldn't walk him to school. I can't walk down Russell Road in the morning. People are rushing off to work. It's dangerous. And you're walking, you have to walk on somebody's lawn. If you stay in the road, it's dangerous. When it snows, so it's not a walkable area. And I can understand it. I mean, I grew up in Queens where you could jump on a bus and then a subway or the elevated 7 train to go to Shea Stadium. I mean, I lived through that, but Albany doesn't have that. And I don't know if I'd want to see Albany have that. As me, I've invested, I own quite a bit of property now up in my area, and I am concerned about it. I think there should be a planned, gradual development, but, just putting up stumpies and, I just don't like the architecture. And a lot of people talk to me about Block 75 and the Auden on Washington Avenue. They said it looks like East German housing. And, I kind of remember seeing pictures of that, and I can understand it. I mean, but I just want to know, is there any way, I guess what's important to me is that you do listen to the neighborhood. And by the way, you approved the Chase Bank up on Homestead and Western, and I really want to thank you. I don't know if you had a chance to check it out, but you were chair that night when that got approved. And the neighborhood really appreciates what you did there, and and a big thank you. But going back to, what's your vision of planning for the future of City of Albany?
Well, I think we did an excellent job with the comprehensive plan and directing resources for the city to be able to complement our existing land uses. For example, we have several large employers that exist in the city of Albany, be it Albany Med or the state or education through the universities. And one issue we've always had is a competitive disadvantage with our suburban neighbors as far as people commuting into the city, choosing to live outside, commuting in and then commuting out. We're losing in two ways. One, we're losing in tax base for people that are choosing to live here and invest in the city. And second, we're losing out on those secondary economic benefits of them either choosing to make a purchase here or choosing to go to a restaurant. I think one thing that I've been excited to see is a lot of development in the neighborhood surrounding those institutions, because number one, they have access to that employment. They can either walk across the street or utilize transit that takes vehicles off the road. It certainly fits with Albany's Green Initiative goals. But number two, it means people are putting down roots here. My neighborhood in particular in Pine Hills, I don't think we would have the same competitive advantage as, say, a neighborhood out in the suburbs where people are paying less taxes but commute into work. And it's been really great to see that Albany home prices, I don't know if you follow the real estate market, housing prices in Albany have been quite strong recently. Houses now, it's a very competitive, strong market, and people are looking to move back to Albany. So I am encouraged that the city has made investments and partnered with organizations like CDTA and the Albany Water Board to be able to make significant investments in our infrastructure that encourage people to look at Albany as a viable alternative to the suburbs and put down the ability to spend money here, support the local tax base, and choose Albany as opposed to commuting in from elsewhere. And so I think the USDO did a great job in making sure that we have the legal underpinnings to be able to increase density and development along routes of transit while still protecting the historic neighborhoods, the neighborhoods where we've traditionally had single family homes. And I think many of the corridors in the city where we are seeing a lot of the more dense development, I think are going to be able to ensure that Albany has a healthy and vibrant tax base and that we have a city that continues to attract people.
Well, Martin, I just want to comment on that too, because, and I brought up earlier, and I don't know if you heard, I mean, we see the problem in New York City right now with all the apartments. People are leaving. They don't want that density because of the COVID virus. And, maybe we'll get the vaccine and it'll go away, but then there'll be, there could be another one. We just don't know.
Yeah,
So
I think it's also
that's why we're
important.
seeing the prices of single family homes go up. And in Connecticut and all these places that we're suffering, we do see it going up. I mean, there is a place for it, but one of the things I've always pushed for, and I argue, why aren't we seeing more condos? When you talk about putting down roots, renting an apartment and being transient is not putting down roots. And I mean, if you go back to the history of Albany, that's why single family homes have always been, pushed. That's where you get a tax base, you get the people who live there. So
Sure.
sorry, I didn't mean to override you.
Yeah, I think there's two elements to that. One is the public health side. I think what the problem is when we look at a public health perspective is not density, it's crowding. And those are two different distinct initiatives. Those are two different and distinct issues that blend into planning and public health. So those I'm certainly not qualified to comment on. The second element is we are seeing an explosive growth of apartment in the region. In Bethlehem, in Guildland, in southern Saratoga County, we are seeing an extraordinary boom of apartments being constructed in the region. Part of that has to do with a changing mindset. The classic American dream of the 3-bedroom house and picket fence is not exactly what the market is demanding right now. A lot of people either can't afford to live in those houses, or as I think I heard one of our other applicants talk about, they've been moving around a lot. And so we're seeing, and this is reflected in our job data as well on a regional scale, a lot of influx of people that are moving here to either work in chip fab or the industries where it's footloose and people are moving around a lot. And so it makes it very difficult. Second, we're living in an economic environment where people are competing with paying back student loans or taking on a sizable mortgage. So the cost considerations for putting down roots are difficult. When it comes to people living in apartments here, I think it's a good opportunity to grab them, because the opportunity cost of them living in an apartment in Bethlehem is maybe they get sucked into the social network that exists in Bethlehem. And it's a fine community. I don't mean to disparage them, but I'd rather have them live here in Albany and see how amazing that New Scotland strip of restaurants can be on a Saturday night, because it is second to none. And I want to see people choose to live in Albany because they could really choose to live anywhere. I'd prefer that they live in Albany for the benefit of my neighborhood, but for the benefit of the community as a whole.
Thank you, Martin. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Other committee members, questions? Council Member Ballerin.
Martin, how are you? Hope you and your family are doing well.
Doing well. We're holding it together.
Good to see you. I'm going to ask you the same question I'm asking all of the candidates for today's that we've met with today. When you're making some of these difficult decisions, I'm asking candidates to look at the map. Look at where some of these initiatives that are being looked at to put in certain neighborhoods are going. I represent the 11th ward, as you know, the minority majority district. And we have a lot of challenges in our neighborhoods. As you know, you walked with me neighborhood wash many years ago when we first met. We had a lot less gray hair and no probably why we didn't have any gray hair.
No.
And so you know the challenges that we have. You've seen the challenges that we have. And there seems to be a magnet effect with these type of initiatives in certain communities, where certain communities have a unfair burden that other neighborhoods don't. And when neighbors have issues about it, some say it's, not in my backyard, but it's really not in my backyard. It's why my backyard again? Why my neighborhood again? We've been kind, we've been open, we've been receptive to these type of initiatives in the past, but now we're being seen as the neighborhoods that's where you put them. And, that makes it hard when you're trying to already overcome already existing challenges to be able to develop, to be able to grow. And to be able to make it so that it's a neighborhood where you can attract more individuals to want to stay and live and raise their families. So how do you balance that? Where there's neighborhoods that have been saturated with special needs initiatives, have had more than their fair share of these responsibilities, with equity and making sure that all neighborhoods, if you're going to put something on Central Avenue, why don't you put it on Western Avenue? Or even looking beyond just the city of Albany, I get frustrated that they put certain things on Central Avenue that residents that use it, or the individuals that use it, 75% are not even from Albany County. So why don't we look at making sure there's a fair share of these type of initiatives, so that it's not just some communities that are holding a heavy burden.
So if I understand your question correctly, there's a couple of parts. The first one is whether we have saturation of social services types of facilities within Albany. That's certainly been one thing that people have been concerned about. One, from a saturation perspective, and two, from a property tax perspective, where we're expected to provide services to people from around the region, because why? Because we have an urban center. I mean, the people that are utilizing these facilities are not only from Albany, they're from wealthier communities as well. And why isn't that shared? I think that's more of a state decision or a land use decision rather than a Board of Zoning Appeals decision. Number one, the board does not have discretion over siting facilities. We are almost a victim of circumstance in that when a facility comes before us, we're being asked to adjudicate a particular issue, be it a use variance or an area variance. So to that second issue where you talk about the facility, I think you're talking about the Blood Plasma Center. If I'm trying to read between the lines on Central Avenue, that decision to locate at that particular plaza was already made by the applicant. And in their material describing why they selected that location, it was because of its activity, that proximity to transit, and it's basically geographically dead center of City of Albany. So that calculation, I don't believe, was made at the behest of the board. It was merely brought to us as far as something to weigh in on. Second, I absolutely understand the moral struggle, if you will, about just determining whether a business is predatory or not. That isn't something that the board is able to review. Our request in that particular case was to review what type of use it was. Was it a personal service use? Was it a medical use? We had a really difficult time scratching our heads because the USDO never tried to complement every kernel of a potential business's use. And in that particular decision, the board determined that it was more like a light manufacturing use because it was not an area where people were being treated, and it was not a sales function. It was more of a processing type of facility. So the board's scope was a narrow review of that particular project, not with how it was cited, but more so the type of industry that it represented because it wasn't defined in code. Certainly with those types of facilities, there are external impacts that could include loitering or parking issues. Those are more considerations that we would hope that that either modifications to the USDO or the planning board could impose upon their review of a site plan for a facility. So on one level, it's an issue that the state should be dealing with as far as citing social services facilities. And on the second, the difficult understanding is the narrowness of the BZA's ability to adjudicate that one particular issue. Did you have a follow-up, looks like?
Go ahead, Alfredo.
Well, I wanted to agree with you at a certain point. A lot of it does fall on the state and where the state decides to fund these initiatives and fund these programs. And it always seemed to be funded in Black and brown neighborhoods because that's where you see these initiatives going into. And that's the problem, that they don't seem to share the burden. And then they want to blame those neighborhoods for a lot of the issues that are in those neighborhoods. But what have you brought to these neighborhoods? What have you developed in these neighborhoods? And what kind of growth have you allowed for these neighborhoods? So, yeah, you're right. Part of it does have to do with the state and how they fund these initiatives. But we also do have, we can't just, not accept some responsibility. We are city officials and we have to take the responsibility of what we allow and what we don't allow in our neighborhoods and in our communities, and what we fight for. And I strongly believe we need to fight, to be fair and to be just and to make sure that we're bringing things into neighborhoods that we know that are already struggling. We bring things that are going to help them, overcome those struggles and not be a magnet for additional challenges. So I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge all of us that's what we should be looking to do as well. And it may bring a lawsuit, and you know what? So be it, because we need to defend and fight for some of these neighborhoods that have been forgotten, that have been left behind, and that have been purposely, I'll say, allowed to decay.
Alfredo, get us that information on the Fair Share Act. I think all of us would be
We will.
interested in looking at it. My experience is the state has tremendous power about where they want to site a lot of these facilities. So
Yeah,
it'd be
you
great to
take that, and
challenge it.
I'll get you some more information, because I think, we need to be fair on how we allocate these different initiatives.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Conti.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Martin. So I've known you going back to your days when you lived here in the 6th Ward. And I've always had a great deal of respect for you and your
Thank you.
your knowledge, et cetera. I think you're uniquely well qualified to sit on the zoning board or any board related to planning. And I'm glad you're continuing, and I hope you'll be around for a long time. It's sort of interesting. The resolution that is before us right now confirming your reappointment is in effect because we won't adopt it until our December 7 meeting for a 24-day term, which is a little, which goes back to when we adopted the charter in '98. This is one of the big issues that we were dealing with, was the council's confirmation authority. We shouldn't be, considering 6 appointments tonight. That was not what the state law provides. It's not what the charter provides. And it's a little frustrating. And then also the annual plan provisions within the USDO. So I know you sometimes have commented on some of the things the council may have done. That's probably based on some of the frustrations that we have in terms of what the intention is and what our authority is and how it sometimes is not followed. So hopefully we can move on beyond that. But I just want to make sure you understand that there are issues like that that really frustrate us and in effect undercuts our authority as the legislative branch and a check and balance on the executive. And that's sometimes you see that expressed in different ways. But again, I think I don't really have any questions because I will make one observation. You talked earlier about some of the issues about home ownership or investment, and one of the things I've noticed on my own block here is that when properties come up on the market, and the real estate market down here in the Center Square area is very strong, not unusual for properties to go over their asking prices. Actually, it seems common. But often what I sometimes see is it's a competition between someone who is looking for, that opportunity to be an owner occupant and an out-of-town investor who sees it as an opportunity to make an investment as a rental property. And what I see a couple of times is that properties, there are a couple of examples in my block, properties that might otherwise have been owner occupied where there was an interest there, that the prospective owner was basically outbid by someone from out of town who now made it a rental unit. And just the other day, in fact, about a couple of weeks ago, I was out front raking leaves or whatever. Someone pulls up and they're looking at one of the houses across the street, and he says, hello, and then we get to talk. Turns out he's someone who has come up from the city, from Brooklyn, who his broker had pointed out this particular property that he was looking at, which was in foreclosure, which I didn't even know it was. I'm not sure if it was or not, but that his broker had told him was in foreclosure, and he was up here looking at potential opportunities for investment. And so I'm seeing that happen, and I'm wondering, we want to be a place where, people want to invest. We also want to strengthen the market, the owner occupant market. And I don't know if there's a conflict there, but I do notice that when you have people who have a stake in the neighborhood in a way, that there's a stronger civic involvement than you might otherwise see. And with some of the developments that we see are people who are transient in the sense they're up here for a couple of years, but don't have that. They want a good neighborhood, but they don't have that same stake and involvement. And once they're done with whatever there are, whether it's education, job, or anything like that, they're heading back out again. And I think I understand the rental markets, and that's important to bring people in, but I'm trying to understand also, how do we get that in, that civic engagement that I think we sometimes lose. And I think you sometimes have a feeling for that up where you are, because I know when you have a house in your area, your block, or whatever up on the market, you want the right person there to move in.
Yeah,
so and I was just maybe spouting off a bit, but
no, and I totally understand where you're coming from. It's actually uniquely similar to what's happening in our block. I mean, we have probably the most diverse block I can think of, and we have students, We have elderly folks, we have families. On one side of me, I have a family that's been here 20 years and has 3 adult children. And on the other side of me, I have a 6-unit building where only 3 units are occupied because the, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
We have a house 2 doors down from us that was habitually problematic in their upkeep of the house, either trash in the bushes or not taking care of things, or abandoned shopping carts behind it, rotting wood, falling apart. And people bought it and they're fixing it up. And I had the opportunity to meet them and said, hey, I'm really glad that you bought this house. Are you moving in? Are you renting it out? Are you going to make an investment in the neighborhood? And they bought the house as, I'm not making this up, they bought this house and they describe it as their vacation house. They're from Brooklyn and this is where they want to come up on the weekends. And they're fixing up the house. I mean, they put a new roof on the porch, they painted it, they're sanding down and repainting all the windows. I can hear machines finish the floors and I am overjoyed.
Yeah.
So for me, I think as a property owner, I want to see people make an investment. I'm less concerned about whether they're renting or owning. I just want to see investment because I have a house across the street from me. They gutted it down to the studs. It's been like that for 6 years. It used to be a site of frequent parties. The owner lives out of state. And it's just frustrating. I don't want that to become the norm for any neighborhood.
Right.
And I think
Investment is important.
I agree. Neighborhoods have had a lot of transient people, but we haven't noticed it because it's been more house to house rather than building to building.
Yeah.
I am optimistic that we will start to see more people buying properties, investing in them and taking care of them.
Yeah. I just want, also people to be involved in their neighborhoods and have that civic engagement, civic involvement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, but I strongly support your reappointment. I think you're an asset to the city and I'm glad you're continuing.
Thank you for the kind words, Richard. I really appreciate it.
It's pretty wild to think of Albany as a vacation place.
I know. I'm like, did you know Saratoga? Nope.
Come to Albany.
No, we have everything
Okay.
we need here. You don't need to move to Saratoga. Don't pay their ridiculous prices.
Okay,
Love you. Stay
Owusu,
here.
Owusu, you had to get some questions or comments.
Yeah, just questions and comments. Also, I just want echo Richard's sentiment. Martin, I think you're such a great asset to the city of Albany, and just looking at your resume, your background, you're more than qualified for to sit on a board of zoning. Quite frankly, as a new council member, I remember my early years when I look at development, I always had in my mind, what are the tax breaks that they're receiving? And that used to be a thought that I used to have that made me anti-development in a sense, particularly before I got into office. But learning and listening and looking at the 2030 plan and listen to the neighborhood as it relates to walkability, walkable neighborhoods, and what other cities are doing to promote walkability, and also the change that's occurring all across many cities and also towns. I mean, we're not the town of Albany. We're not the village of Albany. We are the city of Albany. And in cities, you have walkable neighborhoods where you have restaurants, you have grocery stores, you have et cetera, hospitals. You're able to walk everywhere. So I just want to thank you so much for your commitment to planning, and also your commitment to want to volunteer on this for the Board of Zoning. My question more so is, that NIMBY mentality, not in my backyard mentality. There are some people who believe, and I've done some research where most of the time who are anti not in my backyard or support not in my backyard are typically affluent white male or white females as it relates to who have the time and energy to come in front of zoning boards or boards and to show their opposition to some type of development. How do you weigh in between what a neighborhood want and what is great, what's the greater good for the city of Albany?
Yeah, I think number one, I think change is really difficult, especially for somebody that may have invested here or lived here most of their life. I feel that same way. I mean, when we talk about the New Scotland project, that pharmacy that's located there hasn't been Kessler's Pharmacy in 25 years, but it's still ingrained in my brain as that's what it is. And I think we have to respect the feelings and opinions of folks that are afraid of change. And I think there's absolutely valid opinions to those, because with change comes uncertainty. In the other respect, we have for 400 years since our country has been founded, we have been experiencing changes, and there have been bumps along the road. And certainly with development, there have been fears with how development affects our community. Before I was in the Boarding and Zoo Appeals, I was jumping up and down, hopping mad about a parking garage that was located down the street from me that was approved as part of the Park South plan update. It hasn't been the monster next door that I thought it was going to be. But at the time, I really did think that that was going to absolutely destroy the fabric of the neighborhood. I think the thing about change is to really carefully communicate the elements of the project to a neighborhood, to be able to communicate why that particular site may be best suited. Perhaps it's access to transit, perhaps it's access to a major employer, perhaps it's access to a university or an educational institution that makes that particularly attractive. I think also we need to do a better job of communicating the regional realities are that our region is not growing at an extraordinary rate, but we are seeing extraordinary land use growth outside the boundaries of Albany. So what that means is people are leaving the city and building elsewhere. And what we have is a real struggle, both in the city for tax base and residents, and in the suburban communities where they feel the last one in has to turn the light off. Those don't have to happen at the same time. I think there are so many opportunities throughout the city of Albany for investment and development where I really think a lot of the concerns about change are because people are just unfamiliar with change. And I think that they have not seen the benefits that come with additional development in the city that the investment provides. And I think to some degree, we do need to carefully listen through and modify proposals. And I think there has been a great deal of that as projects have moved forward. But ultimately, I think a number of these projects, the community benefits they bring, the additional people living in the neighborhoods, I think they bring a sense of vibrancy. And I don't think there's been any evidence presented that they have a significant negative impact on property values. But I do think that change is very difficult. I absolutely understand that. And I think it's one of the unfortunate things that we're going to experience change as we ebb and flow and we look to the future. There are certain factors in place like our national economy, which are affecting change, which we as a city don't have any ability to regulate ourselves, but are ultimately going to lead to land use changes going forward. And we just need to be prepared to pivot and be able to be successful and communicate that to our residents.
Thank you.
Martin, you know, there's a temptation to continue talking with you all night on many different topics concerning the city of Albany. However, you are here for reappointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And, you know, I just want to add you're a really important voice here in our community. And I very much appreciate your willingness to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals and your continued service.
Thank you.
I'm
I've really liked it. So thank you
That's
for the
great.
opportunity.
So I'd like to ask committee members, would someone like to put a motion forth? Councilmember Ballerin. Do we have a second to approve?
Second.
Go ahead. You should say something there, Councilmember Ballerin.
I was just gonna say I'd like to move forward name for Martin Daly for the zoning board. We may not always agree, but Martin I know is a good man and he's got the best interest in the city.
Okay, do we have a second for Martin's appointment? Second by Councilmember Hoey, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you, all council members. And thank you, Brad and Amy, for appearing tonight. We really didn't have to turn to you as much as I thought we might, but we appreciate you being here very much and all that you do to keep these boards running as well as they do. And thank you to the council staff who's been doing such a tremendous job getting us ready for these meetings. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, a second. Okay, adjourned. And thank you again, everyone. And good night. Tom, good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.